Go ahead and get started this morning. Well, welcome. I'm so excited. Happy Friday to our 25th annual VICA Business Conference. Thank you to all of you for being here today. We know it would not be possible without all the support of all of you and our sponsors. So I'm Marla Clemow, and I'm the regional president for LA Metro for Wells Fargo, and I'm also proud to say that I'm a board member. And this is my favorite conference, and I was thinking this morning about what I always get from this conference, and there's a lot of things and a lot of opportunity to learn. But this is one of my favorite. You have the best, the brightest, the economists here this morning. We have 3 of them to share with you some perspectives on our future. I love it. And then I got some other advice. I have a baby that's turning a year in a few weeks, and I got some great parental advice. So Don was just talking to me about his daughter and how to really make sure you're present and available. And then Stuart the baby recently. So this is a great place to get a lot of advice. Thank you, VICA. I mean, there's not enough words to express how much they advocate for small business. They're just the leaders in our community. So thank you for putting this together. Wells Fargo is also committed to the community. So I was trying to think about what advice I give small businesses this morning. I've been with Wells Fargo for 19 years. I love small business. So I called my dad. He says it's snowing. I said, oh, wow. It is California dreaming. We got great weather here. And the second thing, I said, Dad, I got to give advice. So I helped my dad with his small business. It was a cattle ranch in Montana, town of 100 people. And I said, Dad, what advice do I give these small business owners? And he said, well, first, as I always told you, be nice to others, help your neighbors. When a town of 100 people, you got to help your neighbors. There's no other resources. And second of all, he said, well, remember what your grandpa told you. Find someone that is a trusted advisor. Get a relationship with an advisor, a bank, whatever you choose, that can help you grow your business. And he told me the story of my grandfather who went to the bank. Now, he had to drive 2 hours to the bank because, again, I lived in the middle of the nowhere, Wisdom, Montana. And he had to drive 2 hours. So he told us the story about a bank that when he went in, really made him feel special and made sure that they took care of all of his needs the first time because he can't keep driving in, and made sure that he was set up for success so his business could grow. Now, at the time, I'm a small girl, right? So I didn't know, but it was Wells Fargo. And full circle, I was 2 days ago in Arizona where we meet with everybody from Wells Fargo to talk about how we can help our small business customers, ironically. And there's a gentleman there from Montana, and he said, he saw my name tag. He said, Marc Clemow, and he said, Marla Clemow, and he said, was your grandfather Marc Clemow? I said, yeah, and he said, I was one of his bankers. So, wow, this is 2 days ago. This is all about relationship building. And that's what we want to do at Wells Fargo, and I know whatever bank you choose, you can do that. I want to share with you our commitment to small business. Just so you know, we are America's #1 small business lender. We're really proud of that. We know that you drive our economy and help us grow. And so that's very important to us. But more importantly, we know it's important to have someone to talk to. So we have over 100 business bankers, many of them here today. Thank you. If you could raise your hands, I'm very proud of this team. They are here to serve you and discuss how to grow your business, take it to the next level, and make sure all your needs are met. At Wells Fargo, it's about helping our customers succeed financially, and that's what we're determined to do. So with that being said, thank you again for all being here. I did bring a friend. It is appropriate because I'm really a cowgirl, dressed in banker clothes. I did ride horses on our cattle ranch. And I brought Mac. I hope you enjoy him. He's in your bag, so don't forget to get him. As you know, Wells Fargo, our icon is our stagecoach, and Mac helps pull the stagecoach. Every single pony we have has history. So look at the tag and you'll find out our history, but we've been around since 1852. I also want to make sure I share my thank yous to all the supporters of VICA, and especially the Business Forecast presenting sponsor along with me, and that's Woodbury University. So thank you to Don and Woodbury. Also want to thank our breakfast sponsors, Cal State University Northridge and U.S. Bank. We couldn't do it without you gentlemen and your organization, so thank you so much. And then at your seat, there's an exit survey for the breakfast forecast. We encourage you to fill it out at the end of the session and return it to a VICA staff member or the registration booth. And VICA needs your feedback in order to prepare for next year's event. Now, I have the distinct honor and pleasure, and I'm also a board member of CSUN, to introduce Dr. Ken Lord, Dean of the College of Business and Economics. Please give him a warm welcome.
Thank you so much, Marla. What a wonderful gathering. This is thrilling for me to be able to be here with you today. It's an honor for me to be able to welcome you on behalf of Diane Harrison, President of California State University Northridge, who will be joining us later in the day. Interestingly, this being the 25th anniversary of this event, I just heard, that I have something in common with that. I've been here about 25 days, having moved here from Pennsylvania, actually a bit longer than that, but I just started August 1st. And having attended a bit belatedly the new employee orientation just earlier this week, I could regale you with information about employee benefits, but that would really excite you. So rather than do that, I'd just like to make reference to a couple of points about CSUN and the College of Business and Economics. You probably perhaps are aware of our burgeoning enrollments. We just admitted, I understand, our largest freshman class in history. We now enroll more than 38,000 students, ranked 10th in the U.S. in bachelor's degrees awarded to underrepresented minority students, 5th in the U.S. and 1st in California for bachelor's degrees, and 10th nationally for master's degrees to Hispanic students. And in the College of Business and Economics, we are home of the nation's 7th largest undergraduate business program, recognized for excellence via our accreditation with AACSB International, which ranks us among the top 5% of business degree granting institutions around the world. We've been recognized by U.S. News & World Report as being among the top part-time MBA programs in the nation, and have been recognized for 7 consecutive years as being among the best business schools by Princeton Review. And within the last year, we're named among the top 25 schools for future financial planners by Financial Planning Magazine. So we're grateful to all of you and so many others in this community with whom we partner to make this quality education available to our students. And I don't want to take really any more time, but I'd be interested in seeing, just by show of hands, how many CSUN alumni do we have here today? Fabulous. How many of your companies employ CSUN alumni? Okay, even more. That's wonderful. We are dedicated to outreach. We understand that it is in partnering with you that we can deliver the best of business and economics education to our students. So congratulations to VICA for this fabulous event. I have the deepest of respect for my colleagues here in this panel, looking forward to hearing from them. And I would just say in closing that after having spent the last 7 years in Scranton, Pennsylvania, I'm looking forward to any forecast that does not include hurricanes, floods, and blizzards. So thank you.
Good morning. Thank you, Kenneth. My name is Don St. Clair. I'm Vice President at Woodbury University. I've been at Woodbury for 15 years, and having heard the impressive list of achievements from Cal State Northridge this morning, you know that I'm tempted to counter that with my own list of achievements. But I'm going to resist that. I'm going to resist that temptation. Thank you, Dr. Lord. Thanks to Cal State University Northridge and U.S. Bank for sponsoring what I think is going to be an enlightening economic forecast for 2013. Now, we put this program together, and the program brochure was all fixed and mailed, and the agendas were all set, and the presenters got their PowerPoints ready, and geez, something happened this week, huh? In the economy that we weren't planning on. So it's going to be interesting to see how light on their feet our presenters are this morning to adjust to current events. Our panelists have prepared some important information for us. So let me introduce our speakers very quickly, and then we're going to get started. First to my right is David Heidel Jr., Regional Investment Manager for U.S. Bank. He'll be giving us an overview of where the economy is going on a national level. To his right, Marc Doss, Regional Chief Investment Officer for Wells Fargo. He will be giving us an overview of where the economy is going on a state level. And following Marc is our old friend our longtime friend, not old, longtime friend, William Roberts, Director of the San Fernando Valley Economic Research Center and Professor of Economics at California State University Northridge with the local forecast. David, you're up.
So not only do I have to be light on my feet, but this is kind of like a quiz because I can't really see my slides. I can barely. So if they don't go in perfect order, my apologies for that. But so my position is Regional Investment Manager, Regional Investment Director with U.S. Bank. Just to give you a perspective of the group that I work for, it's our Private Client Reserve Group, which is a group within our Wealth Management team. And the Private Client Reserve and the Wealth Management Group manage about $110 billion in assets. I'm actually the Regional Investment Director for the Central Region, although we do have our Western Regional Investment Director here, Jeffrey Kravitz, who recently joined us. And so I flew in from Minneapolis today, so I'm really enjoying your weather. It's 50 degrees and raining there right now. But personally, I oversee about 50 investment professionals and about $23 billion in assets. And what's interesting is I also sit on a group of 6 people that make strategic and tactical asset allocation decisions. So I think that's why I was given the national perspective, because I spent a lot of time thinking about the national economy. So regarding being light on my feet, here's one of my favorite quotes, and it's by the Prime Minister of Luxembourg, Jean-Claude Juncker, and it says, "We all know what to do, we just don't know how to get reelected after we've done it." So possibly this is me being light on my feet, because I think this is the situation that we face in Washington right now. And it actually there's some significant reasons why we've gotten to this point, and I'll touch on a few of those in my national comments. But let's start off with the idea of phases. And let me tell you what I want to focus I'm only going to go about 10 minutes this morning, but let me tell you what I want to focus on, and that's the fact that it's our belief that the economy moves in phases. We're very, very accustomed to looking at economic growth or growth of the markets or inflation from a year-to-year basis. So what did the S&P do in 2012? What will inflation do in 2013? But I think that's actually a disadvantage to go in annual periods, because I think there are longer stretches of time or phases. Think of life cycles or think of the business cycle, where there are general sets of characteristics that affect the markets. So what I'd like to tailor my comments to this morning is identifying what we think the common characteristics were of the last phase and what we think the characteristics of the next phase that we believe that we're entering currently. And I want to do this by looking at a few different elements, including the economy, fiscal health, employment, the consumer, central banks, and interest rates. So let's delineate let's quickly go through what the last phase looked like. And I'm going to date the last phase, by the way, to the bottom of the Great Recession of 2008-2009, which was March of 2009. I'm also going to suggest that the latest phase is probably ending this year in 2013. So let's first go with the economy. And this is the Great Recession followed by a recovery. The best way that I can illustrate that is simply by looking at gross domestic product, the value of all goods and services produced in our economy. And what you'll see is we had a tremendous fall off in growth, followed by a very big recovery. And although this may look like, okay, well, we've resumed our previous trajectory, there was a lot of collateral damage done during this Great Recession and during this contractionary period that'll affect the next phase. Let's also look at fiscal health. And this is regards our country's fiscal health. We really saw a rapid deterioration and stabilization. You know, there were a lot of good books and articles written about the consequences to having deficits that were more than 10% of our gross domestic product. And as you can see from the chart up here, we actually flirted with that level during the Great Recession. Now, fortunately, we've stabilized since then, thanks to sequester cuts and increasing tax revenues. But we really did flirt with disaster when it came to our fiscal health. And it'll be interesting to see how that plays out in the next phase, and I've got some predictions for you. Regarding the employment situation, you know, this was really probably the toughest spot because we saw a tremendous collapse in employment and then now some tepid improvement, though nothing that I think we would like. What's interesting is if we look at it from the perspective of the unemployment rate, what you'll see is the tremendous spike in unemployment that happened. And this doesn't even tell you the effect that no increases in wages and reduced hours had upon the economy. If you add all of those together, it's actually fairly severe. What you see here is a recovery in the last phase that we're just concluding, where unemployment has improved. But I think the most interesting part of this slide is the 6.5% number. This is the Federal Reserve's new target for where they'd like to see unemployment. And I think just a few short years ago, we would have thought 6.5% structural unemployment was an unacceptable level. And now it's the Federal Reserve's target, and I think that speaks volumes. Regarding the consumer, you know, they've really pulled back and now have recovered. And if you think about the consumer, and I know as small business owners, you're very dependent on both the consumer, their balance sheet picture, and their enthusiasm or consumer sentiment. And if you look at what happened to consumer sentiment, it absolutely plunged, and it makes sense because consumers basically build their confidence on three pillars. One is stable employment income. Another is the value of their homes and the equity that they have in their homes. And then a very distant third, unfortunately, is their investment portfolios. And you saw all three of those pillars kicked out from under them during the Great Recession. Now, we have had a tremendous recovery in confidence since then. But I'll tell you, there's something secret that's not in this chart, and that's that the recovery has favored more well-heeled consumers or the wealthier demographics of the country. They've had most of the recovery in sentiment, and the poorer parts of our country have really lagged behind, and it's because their employment growth and their fiscal situation, their personal balance sheet situations have lagged behind. So there's more in this chart than what it shows. Regarding central banks, since I'm in California, I feel like I should use a movie reference. If there was an Academy Award to be given for all of the actors in the last phase, certainly the central banks should receive it. Their unprecedented, tremendously creative, tremendously ambitious plans and proposals to get us out of the liquidity and solvency crisis that we experienced just 5 short years ago has been unprecedented. And their involvement continues to be incredibly important. And it's not just our central bank, but it's central banks around the world. Their role will still be tremendously important in the next phase, although we believe it will change, and that'll nuance how markets react. But really, this was the white knight of the last phase. If it wasn't for central banks, I don't think we'd be sitting here talking about a recovery today. By the way, this is another one of our favorite quotes, and this was from the Financial Times a little bit ago, but it's that the first rule of investing is that if something looks too good to be true, it probably is. And the second rule is that the Federal Reserve can suspend the first rule. They have certainly done that, and they continue to do that as they decided not to taper in September. So the story continues. By the way, I think it's important to quantify for you just exactly how extreme the effects of central bank actions have been globally. This shows the monetary base. Now, this is very important because this affects credit, this affects money in circulation, this affects a lot of things that drive consumer sentiment, consumer confidence, and business growth. And what you see is that we had a fairly stable monetary base in advanced economies of about $3 trillion until the Great Recession. We demarcated the collapse of Lehman Brothers here, and now you've seen a tremendous acceleration in money growth. In fact, we're now approaching $8 trillion, and we expect that this will continue, particularly with the aggressive programs announced in Japan. Interest rates, how low can they go? It was like the limbo during the last phase, and they went pretty darn low. We saw sub 2% rates in long-term 10-year treasuries, and we've really seen short rates go to 0. This was another incredibly important backdrop to the last phase, because what it did is it's provided the support for the recovery. It created a very low bar for business growth and painted a very attractive picture for fixed income investors. And this is likely to change, although maybe not as substantially as some people fear in the next phase. GDP that we experienced during the last phase of economic activity. So potential GDP is determined by things like how many people are available to be employed and what's our productivity and a whole bunch of different variables. But it basically shows that our economy grew at less than its potential for quite a period of time. The Congressional Budget Office is assuming that we catch up by 2016, 2017. Quite frankly, I'm not so certain that we'll close that gap quite that fast. And I'll tell you, the longer the government stays shut, the more this gap increases, because we're not living up to potential when we've got a third of the government that's not functioning at the moment. So a slow recovery, but we do expect a recovery in economic activity, and maybe a gap that'll take 5 or more years to close. By the way, with the last chart, one thing about the recovery this time and why it's so different, I heard a phrase, I don't know who said it, but I liked it a lot, and that's that once you've seen one financial crisis, you've seen one financial crisis. And that's what we just went through. It wasn't a business cycle crisis, it was a financial crisis, and they have very different consequences. Regarding fiscal health, we actually see some surprising improvement here, and this is surprising compared to what we thought a number of years back. And partially it's because of the success of the sequester. By the way, you remember the sequester was an accident. This was supposed to be a situation that was so bad that it would bring the two parties together and cause them to agree. Well, it didn't, and it happened. And it was supposed to also be the end of the world at the beginning of this year. Well, we all still seem to be here. So now I think lawmakers will look at the effect of the sequester and say, you know what, this is actually an option for us to be able to reduce our deficits going forward. And in fact, with the fairly tepid growth rates that we've put into our forecast, we still see a decline in the deficit going forward that should result in a much healthier fiscal picture, at least in the short to intermediate term for our country, as long as interest rates stay low. Moving on to employment. When it comes to employment, collapse and then very slow recovery. Okay, there we go. And painfully slow improvement. We see a positive trajectory over the next phase, but that positive trajectory is going to be relatively modest. What's interesting is if I take the chart that I used before and just extrapolate the improvement in unemployment over the, I think the line's in there, I can't quite see it, over the intermediate term future, we ought to reach the Federal Reserve's target probably by the end of next year. But the question is that sufficient? Is a 6.5% unemployment rate, is that a successful target? Does that mean we should start tightening? Also, what does this mean to hours worked? If hours worked continue to be very, very thin, that's going to be troubling. And what does it mean about employment or wage growth? We haven't seen that yet. So there's still a much more nuanced picture when it comes to employment over the next phase, although we do think that it'll continue to improve. Next, let's take a look at the consumer. And really, we think the consumer is feeling better all the time, and there's good reason for them to feel better. One chart that I think is interesting is the household net worth chart. And what this shows you is after the collapse in household net worth in the last Great Recession, it's actually recovered to all-time highs. But once again, remember what I said about the skew between kind of the haves and have-nots that's occurred during this. A lot of this accumulation of record-setting household net worth has taken place in the richest portions of our society, not the poorest portions. And I would argue that that's one of the causes of the political polarization that we see happening today, is this bifurcation in society that's going on, and that will slow economic growth going forward. Central banks, I said they won the Academy Award last time. I think they'll be almost important this time. Their actions will be critical in the next phase. They're not getting out of our lives anytime soon, and nor would we want them to. But that said, their policies, we expect, will diverge. And that divergence has interesting consequences because they were all relatively aligned in their stimulus efforts in the past, and that created very highly correlated financial markets. In other words, everything moved together. Very difficult environment to be an active investor. We think that in the next phase that it's very likely that their policies will diverge. Countries like Japan will continue to have to stimulate their economies, while the US will have the option of backing off on stimulus. And that will create lots of various different valuation disruptions in the marketplace. And it'll actually be a much better environment for active investors to potentially add value. But it'll also cause a lot more volatility because you won't have policies acting together. So expect more volatility due to the diverging central bank actions. Finally, interest rates. You know, it's interesting. The chart that we have is kind of a return to normalcy. This is from the Congressional Budget Office. I'm skeptical that we will return to normalcy this quickly, and I'm even skeptical that we will ever return to what we think of normalcy. And let me give you one far-reaching comment regarding the United States economy. I actually think that we were in a very unique phase of time, speaking of phases, from the end of World War II right up until today, or at least the last great financial contraction. We had a very unique set of circumstances that I don't think are gone, and I'm not pessimistic about the country at all. I'm quite optimistic. But I do think that, to borrow PIMCO's Mohammed Al-Arian's term, I think we are in a new normal, and we have to accept that potentially rates won't return to this level anytime soon. Potentially we'll have to get used to different growth rates, and potentially we'll have to get used to higher structural unemployment. I hope that none of us are satisfied with that and we reach for better, but that's what we think is the most likely scenario going forward. So, and actually this is not where I wanted to go in my slide, I don't think. So I'll back up from there, and I'll actually stop my presentation at this point in time, but let me make two concerns internationally. And the two slides that I thought I had in here were a circle that showed the global map, and basically that circle surrounded just a portion of India, China, and kind of Asia. And it's a very small part of the globe. And you in this part of the country know better than anyone how important Asia will be to future world growth. And even though my comments are supposed to be limited to national comments, I can't help but mention a couple things internationally. And one is that that little circle, there was more people that lived inside that circle than lived outside that circle. And that's not important in and of itself, except for the fact that there's a rapidly rising middle class of the people that live inside that circle. And that rapidly rising middle class is the reason that we're not more pessimistic about growth in the developed world. Because honestly, as those consumers move to the middle class and as they demand more consumer goods, this is a chance for the entire world to be able to grow its way out of its very significant debt and deficit problems. The other comment that I wanted to make as well is that we continue to be more and more intertwined nationally. In fact, I hope the next time that we speak at this event, we actually don't delineate it a national economic outlook. We go for a global investment outlook with this portion of it, simply because I don't think that you can separate those two anymore, and that'll become increasingly apparent as we move through the next phase. With that, I'll wrap up my official comments, and I'll turn the floor over to Marc Doss. Marc?
Thanks, David. It's a real pleasure to be here with you. My role is actually to be the investment thought leader for the entire state of California. So I'm actually very fortunate to travel all over this great state. And I'm really lucky because about 5 years ago, I was actually at Lehman Brothers. So I went through the failure of Lehman Brothers and then ended up at Wells Fargo, which is very, very fortunate because the ground fell out from underneath me when I was at Lehman Brothers. And I will tell you that I've never seen clients so scared. They thought they lost all their assets when they were at Lehman Brothers, and the assets actually transferred over eventually to Barclays. And then many of those clients are now here at Wells Fargo. So I'm going to talk about the state economy, and I just, it always makes me think, you know, we're talking about a lot of statistics. I don't know if you know what Mark Twain said, but he said there are lies, damn lies, and statistics. And so, you know, we're giving you a lot of statistics here, and we actually don't have the most important statistic that normally comes out on the first Friday of the month. We don't have the unemployment report because of what's going on in Washington. So I'll get started here. Hopefully this will work. There we go. So this is the great state of California. I thought it would be important to just kind of take a step back. I think we decided we're all Midwesterners here, the three of us at least, the speakers. I'm from Chicago originally, and I was a naval officer at one point and had the opportunity to either go to Norfolk, Virginia, or San Diego, California. So I think I chose well. And so this is, just take a look at some of these statistics. I won't go through all of them, but you know, the 8th largest economy in the world, it's really incredible to think it's a $2 trillion economy. the size of the number of people, the largest consumer market, exports 161 billion. Just the LA Basin, almost $1 trillion in economic output. So think about the few countries that are bigger economically than California: the US, China, Japan, Germany, but countries like Italy, we're bigger, the economy. We're bigger than India, than Russia, than Canada, than Australia. So this is a massive, massive economy. When I think about my Navy days, this is the aircraft carrier, right, of all states. Once you kind of set it on its course, it does go. And so the only other thing, too, I'd like to mention on this is just how many companies are still here. Despite some of our economic challenges, there are a lot of amazing large companies and then amazing, I didn't even list the number of small companies here. So it's always good to think about positives and negatives when you're looking at the economy. And I'm going to keep myself on time here, so I'm going to skip some of our slides. But these are some of the positives and negatives of what's going on right now. And there really is a difference between the coast and the inland part of California. The difference in the recovery is stark. You can see some of the reasons on the left, the positives, and some of the negatives on the right. Just to give you a stat, if you look at negative home equity in California, this is very telling. It's a little over 15% for the whole state. But if you look at San Francisco, it's only 3.3%. And then if you look at Vallejo or Bakersfield, it's 28.6%, just to show you the stark difference between the coast and the inlands part of the state. And then you can see some of these positives. I'm going to keep going here, but the real estate recovery, I think, is very important for this state. We talked earlier, I guess, about rates. I think rates will stay lower longer than many of us expect, and so that's really an important factor for real estate. The Fed really seems stuck in some ways. They actually tried and talked about tapering, and they saw the market reaction, and so they actually don't have as much flexibility as they probably would like to have at this stage, and so that is a positive for real estate going forward. And then, the growth of Asia Pacific, it's a really, we talked about a global economy. It's really important to consider where California is in this global economy and who we trade with. And so I'll have a few comments a little bit later on that. And then the energy revival in the U.S., I don't think we spent enough time talking about that. There was a really good article in yesterday's Wall Street Journal talking about how the U.S. is now #1 if you add up natural gas and oil. We've now surpassed Russia. So that's a huge factor, positive factor for us going forward. And the question mark for California is the Monterey Shale. Will we consider developing it? It has some huge implications economically, but also environmentally. So it's not clear whether we'll do that. And then some of the other negative things, I think all of you know these issues: the high cost of doing business, certainly the regulatory environment, politics in this state as well, and then our highest income tax rate. That certainly affects, I think, what David and I do, planning around taxes, helping our clients achieve their long-term results. You have to do a lot more tax planning these days. And then we have the pension issue. So these are some of the areas. This is the last report that we had. This is from our economics group. And you can see, this is just looking year over year. And we did have a positive report this last time. And you can see some of the areas, actually, we've had some positive moves up in employment. Still a negative on government, which makes sense, right? We're still actually shrinking state governments. They actually have to have, or local governments, they actually have to have a balanced budget. So they've made some of the difficult decisions that the federal government is still very much struggling with. And you can look, construction also has started to improve, leisure and hospitality. So I won't spend a lot of time on this slide, but some really, pretty positive numbers that we've seen year over year changes here. And then you can see the unemployment rate. You can see, really, our rate here is stubbornly high. It's 8.9% versus 7.3% in the U.S. And we actually, if you look at the line for the state, it actually went up a little bit this last report. And that was despite actually adding over 29,000 jobs. So I'll talk a little bit about that as we go forward. But this is very high for this stage of the recovery, and it shows we are not in a normal recovery and how difficult the road to full recovery is going to be, for this state and for the country. So this is one of the reasons why. You can see this is the labor force participation rate, and California mirrors the country, right? And part of this is a secular decline because of the aging population. There's also a lot of students who are staying as students, but there's also a cyclical component. And yesterday, actually, in San Diego, we had there was a UCSD roundtable, and the president of the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco spoke, and he calculated the cyclical part of this is a little less than 50%. Nobody knows for sure, but there is that component, and that's why the Fed is still trying to do, kind of take extraordinary measures. But you can see from that chart, it is a pretty ugly chart of participation, and that's in part why some of these numbers have been skewed. So it's something to be concerned about, that it has both a cyclical and a secular nature to it. And so there's a lot of retraining that needs to take place. Businesses are going to be burdened probably with more training than they have in the past to retrain people. There's a mismatch between skills and jobs. So this is, for the most part, those are the more difficult problems to resolve on this issue. Okay, so this is actually from a presentation. There's a professor at UCSD that also spoke at the roundtable, Professor Caruso, and this is a couple of his slides that I thought were interesting. You can see we've got a wall of debt in California, and actually 6% of the budget actually goes to pay that debt. So this mirrors the problems that we face in the federal government, right? So that's a long-term problem. At least it's come down some, but I'm going to keep going because we'll run out of time, but I just want to point this problem out. Then, as you go forward, this is the pension problem. And I used to serve until this past year on a pension board. And, we've got a real problem with unfunded liabilities, depending on how you calculate them. Huge, huge long-term problem. We're not the worst in the country. I think actually my home state, Illinois, is the worst. They're probably at like 42% funded on their pensions, which is pretty scary stuff. And the issue, defined contribution versus defined benefit, I will tell you that defined benefit plans' performance are much, much better than defined contribution plans because, we put a huge burden on the individual with defined contribution plans, and oftentimes they make the wrong decision at the wrong time. So this board that I sat on, they have a 25-year track record running a balanced portfolio over 9% annualized. And it shows, how well, and when things were down during the crisis, we were actually able to add to equities, because we were very calm about it. It was a board situation. And so there's a lot of issues around this that I think the trend is obviously to define contribution, but we need to figure out a way to help people to invest their money better, because the average 401k plan, how much do you think it is? It's about $86,000, and that's their main retirement savings. How are you going to retire on that? At least if you have a pension fund, there's a chance that you can live a pretty good life in retirement. So we have a huge problem with people not being able to retire longer term. I'm going to have to go a lot faster here. So this is just showing political polarization. I think everybody knows this. We've seen massive political polarization at the federal level and at the state level. And these are the professors from UCSD's charts again. And this chart is very telling as well. This just shows kind of a median of polarization, and who do you think's at the top? This is a list you don't want to be at the top of, right? But Colorado actually is playing catch up. There's one study now that shows Colorado is actually more polarized than California. And then this is crazy to me, right? To understand what all these propositions are. I don't know, when you go to vote, do you understand what all the propositions are, what they mean? I mean, it makes this state in some ways almost ungovernable, and that's kind of the point to this slide. And this is a really important proposition that passed, and it has really important implications for the state's budget. We actually now have a slight surplus because of Prop 30, and it was actually, we raised the income taxes at the high end, and we also raised sales taxes, so it was both a progressive and a regressive tax, in a sense. And these are some of the positives. We closed the budget gap. Our debt has been upgraded, so we're not the worst in the country. Illinois now is the worst in the country. It has huge implications for our bonds as well, and actually our cost of capital, since we have so much debt. So those are real positives. The negatives are that we have the highest tax rate in the country, personal income tax rate. I spend a lot of time with clients who actually talk about wanting to leave the state. When they actually go through the process of what it would take to leave, they usually don't, but some of them have. Some business owners that are planning to sell their businesses in the next year or two, they are taking steps to make those changes. So it's a long-term concern. It's going to affect business formation in this state. And so, you know, it's a concern, this whole flight from California. I've been signaling I need to go a lot faster. So we're going to skip through this. All right, Trans-Pacific Partnership. I just want to make a quick comment because this is a really important potential growth initiative for the state. If you think about our positioning in the Pacific and towards the Pacific, we have a great opportunity here. And this is something, because the trade talks have stalled with the World Trade Organization, these are talks going on with certain nations in the U.S., and it's a real opportunity for California, as you see some of these numbers, the ability that we actually have to export to Asia. It's actually targeted to be completed by year end, which is way too ambitious, and the Senate would likely take a long time to approve. This is a potential opportunity for the state. And then these are, I'll be done quickly now. These are some UCLA forecasts. I just put this on here because UCLA does a really good job of some local forecasting. Wells Fargo does not actually come up with a target or a forecast just for the state. We have national targets. So this shows you, I think that the message is it's more of the same. It's slow recovery. We do have growth, but it's not, you know, what we would like to see. And so if you're looking at just GDP growth, we're actually estimating we're only going to have about 2% for the U.S. this year. Globally, which David talked about, we're actually expecting 3.4%, so that's important. And then if you're looking forward to next year, we think we'll see a little bit of acceleration, but there's all these wild cards right out there, from 2 to 2.4% in the U.S. And then globally, we're looking at going from 3.4 to 3.6% global growth next year. So one last slide here. So I have to, you know, and the dismal science, you have to give a little humor here, right? So this is my attempt to be funny, but the top 5 reasons not to leave California, right? Not the top 10, we're just doing the top 5. Number 5, it never rains in Southern California. Number 4, Bollywood will never beat Hollywood. Number 3, Disneyland was here way before Disney World. We know that, even though Disney World's pretty nice. Number 2, Silicon Valley has nothing to do with plastic surgery. And then the top reason not to leave California, moonbeam is not just a ray of light. Thank you. I'm turning it over to Professor Roberts. Thank you.
Good morning. It's great to see so many of you here. Apparently you didn't get the memo that the world ended on Tuesday, so you showed up anyway. As you know, I'm Bill Roberts. I'm director of the San Fernando Valley Economic Research Center at California State University, Northridge. Pleased to be back here again for another year. This is a forecast breakfast. And I think forecasts really shouldn't read like a mystery novel, where you have to wait until the last chapter to find out what the results are and that the butler really did it. So in terms of where I see the economy going, putting it up front, I kind of agree with both David and Marc. I see slow growth. I don't see kind of anything really exciting happening in terms of we're going to be much better off a year from now or 2 years from now. Unemployment's going to be pretty much where it is right now. And it kind of scares me. When you get 3 economists on a panel and we all come down about in the same position, I think that's room to be really afraid. Because we don't typically tend to agree. Now, when I was putting together my remarks for this morning, what I was planning on doing was starting it out with a series of tantalizing trivia tidbits about conditions in the valley. You know, what is the average commute time for someone that lives in Burbank? What is the percentage of individuals that speak English as a first language in the home? Now, unfortunately, in terms of doing that, you have to go to the U.S. Census Bureau American Fact Finder. And the data came out about 2 weeks ago, so I went through and got the really important data first, and then on Tuesday I decided to jump in and find these tantalizing tidbits, and I found that the Census Bureau shut down. You know, what can you say? And my daughter was doing a report on Voyager and went into the NASA site and found out that NASA shut down. Now apparently with the Voyager, we can take an unmanned deep space probe and power it up for 15 to 20 years. We can't take an unmanned database on a web server and power that up for 24 hours. I'm sitting here with some data that I'd like to talk about and can't. But what I do have is what I want to talk about in terms of my outline for today. I want to talk about valley growth. I want to talk about building conditions in the valley and kind of end up with some key industries that I think you should be taking a look at or thinking about in terms of future activity. What I found really interesting in looking at the American Fact Finder before it shut down is what we're seeing growth in population. Now, if you look at a long-run view of where the economy is going, the primary driver, if you go back to all the economic growth models that are out there, the primary driver is population growth. Bodies come in, bodies create demand, bodies provide the labor services to push the economy forward, and what's a really nice sign is LA County, which is the only data I could get because we don't get San Fernando Valley data except with a significant lag. The US Census will give us San Fernando Valley data for 2012, assuming they're up and running again in December of this year. So we're going back to at least looking at LA County because that data comes out at a much earlier point. And what we see declines in population do not stimulate growth. So we've got really positive signs for the Valley and for the state of California. We're a destination still. And the only way we can grow faster than the US is if people from other places are moving here. I mean, as all of us on the panel did, we moved here from somewhere else. And today, despite how bad the economy is, there's positive signs. People think there's a good future in terms of coming to California and coming to LA County. So we get population growth, people are moving here. In terms of looking at kind of what's going on with building conditions, it wouldn't be a forecast without a graph with far more information than anybody ever wants to consume. So this is my graph with far more information than you want to consume. What this does is it looks at the housing market. And I think housing is a very important predictor. We rely for the Valley on looking at the housing market because at least there we can get timely data. I get data this month on what happened to housing prices last month. Now, there's two lines here. The blue line is the median housing price for a single-family detached home. The red line is foreclosures that are going on. And if you'll note, there's kind of two peaks that we had. We had a boom in housing prices going into about 1990, followed by a fairly long housing market decline. And as the housing market starts to decline, the economic conditions that generated that drop kick in a little bit later on foreclosures. Foreclosures go up. We had that happening following the rise in 1990 and following the rise going into 2007. And one of the problems with foreclosures is they're predominantly in low-income areas. They're predominantly in the lower-priced housing areas. If you look at the Valley, most of the foreclosures are in Pacoima, Olive View, Van Nuys. You find fairly few foreclosures going on in the foothills or in Burbank and Glendale. But we found that these foreclosures, when you get lower-priced houses going on the market, in fact, we were in 2010, 2011, about 30% of the home sales were foreclosed homes, driving down the median price. We've had fairly significant increases over the last 6 months. If you read the newspaper reports that come out on a monthly basis, we're talking about 20 to 30% year-over-year increases in prices, which sounds like a really nice rate of return. Problem is that 30% is mostly a change in the mix. We're getting fewer sales in the foreclosed homes, in the lower-priced areas. We're getting more sales in the higher-priced homes. And if you have more sales in the higher-priced homes and fewer in the low-priced homes, median prices go up. We've reached over the last 5 months a price of about $510,000, $520,000 for a median Valley home. Now, in terms of where prices should be, and again, following what David and Marc did, we look at a longer run period for making forecasts. Where the housing prices probably should be is based on what drives housing prices. Now, we know there's a ton of information on what determines the price of a home. Clearly, the most important thing is location, location, location. Valley's a great location. number of bathrooms, square footage, whether it has a view or not, and so on. But in terms of general housing price increases, primary driver is inflation. If you look at the past 20 years, the inflation rate for the Valley, looking at the LA Consumer Price Index, has on average been 2.6%. Population growth over the last 15 to 20 years on an annual basis has been about 0.8%, and population growth drives housing prices. And of course, we do have a change in kind of the composition of homes. You know, the house today is not the same thing as the house 50, 60 years ago. In fact, the first house my parents bought was a luxury home. It had a bathroom. It was outdoors, but it was a luxury bathroom. It was a two-seater. You know, we don't put up with that much anymore. You know, 2 bathrooms is probably what we want, just not a two-seater. So if you look at kind of putting on for kind of quality improvements, because we want more in our home today than we wanted 10, 15 years ago, I think about 1% increase is about the right number. On average, I expect home prices over a long period of time to grow at about 4.4%. If you go back to 1980, when the home price in the Valley, the median price was $180K, and you compound that at 4.4% through today, you got about $528,000 for a median Valley home. And that's right about where we're at now. And I think that's a good sign for the Valley. I think we've reached a point where housing prices are going to be relatively stable. I expect them to grow over the next year by 4 to 6%. We aren't going to see what we saw from 2003 to 2007, a 13% annual increase in home prices. I mean, there's no reason, there's no way to justify that kind of an annual increase. Something's got to be going on that drives that. We know what drove it then. It was subprime lending, easy money, looking askance at how you do a mortgage evaluation. We've tightened up on the market much better now. I will expect to see, if you look at the housing reports that come out on month-to-month basis, the next 5 to 6 months, you will read 20 to 30% increases year over year. And that's because we're coming off a base that was driven by the lower income housing prices. 6 to 7 months from now, we should start to see 5 to 6% price increases. Now, I was asked to talk about some Valley industries and what's going on in the Valley industries. This data, by the way, is a little shaky. I'm a statistician. I can lie. These numbers, in some sense, lie, because they're 5-year average, because we don't get for the Valley anything but 5-year averages out of the U.S. Census Bureau when they're up and running. If you look at the last 5 years compared to the previous 5 years, construction is down. Now, we know construction's been down. Building permits have been down for at least the last 4 to 5 years. The finance, insurance, and real estate business has taken a big hit. If you go back to 2006, which is a large part of the early numbers, the 2010 numbers in here, you know, we had places like Countrywide, Washington Mutual, the employment in that area, the huge amount of subprime lending that was going on in 2006 and 2007 is gone. The real estate market, while it's coming back, we've still got fairly high levels of unemployment in that area, or lack of employment. What has been growing, and what we do find in terms of recessions and recoveries, is we find a growth typically in professional. People that lose their job, especially in the managerial range, go into starting up consulting businesses. That pops up in the management numbers. And we're seeing some growth there. Arts, entertainment, recreation, and food is starting to come back again. Primarily in food. We're actually going out to eat more often now, which is a good sign. So the food industry probably should have positive signs. And of course, even when there is a recession and the local governments have problems with their finances, they always find a way to grow. For whatever reason, they seem to be able to get the money to hire the people to do the stuff that they don't want to do. What I found interesting in looking at the numbers that popped out is healthcare doesn't show up here. Now, we know that's an area that's going to grow, but it doesn't show up in large part because there's a huge amount of uncertainty. Part of this debt crisis and the sequestering and the gridlock that's going on in Washington is over health care. And it'll take a while before that settles out and that market actually starts to grow and improve. In terms of areas to look at, you know, if I were sitting there and saying, what would I concentrate on and think is going to grow? Certainly health and senior care. There's a good reason for that. We are, unfortunately or fortunately, we are getting older and we're living longer. Now, I do take solace in this really nice mathematical relationship. I always tell my students, these 20-year-olds, that they're aging at a much faster rate than I am. Because mathematically, that is a true statement. So, healthcare, senior care is going to go on. I expect construction to start coming back. While we don't have the 2012 numbers already, I expect them to show a growth in the construction area. We're seeing significant changes. I mean, you look over at the Topanga Plaza area. There's a lot of construction going on over there. If you drive around the valley, you'll actually see people starting to remodel their homes. Now, it's not going to be the construction growth we had in 2005, 2006, but I think it's a real positive sign. Because typically, if you look at a recession, what pulls us out of recessions, generally speaking, is growth in the construction and the building arena. Manufacturing, I expect home improvements in an area that I would look for. We've put off doing things to make our houses better for the past 5 years, in large part because we have this uncertainty over our income. If you go back to 2009, a lot of individuals were worried that when they show up to work, they'd find a pink slip on their desk and an entire department eliminated. Right now, while unemployment is, in the Valley, it's probably about 9.8%. Again, we don't get Valley numbers, so we can't be specific. But with unemployment even there, the people that are employed are much more comfortable in the jobs that they have. If you're comfortable in the job and feel secure about the income level that you have, you're going to go out and start doing home improvements. And I was glad to see Marc talk about the shale oil in Monterey. I'd feel a little remiss if I didn't at least put it on your radar. Now, I know it's a huge political issue. It's got huge environmental consequences, but there's also apparently a huge reserve of oil out there. And if you look at kind of what oil can do to an economy, North Dakota is booming, in large part because of fracking and shale oil. Unemployment in North Dakota is right now 3.1%. Now, I don't expect it to open up, we all of a sudden start drilling tomorrow, but at least it's something to look at. All three of us predict slow, gradual growth over the next year or so. In fact, I expect this coming year to be the best year out of the last 5, but it's still not going to be 2006, 2007. But if all of a sudden we open up that oil drilling, all bets are off and the Valley economy is going to do things we've never seen before. And at this point, I'll turn it over to Don. Thank you all very much. Pleasure being here.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks, Marc. Thanks, David. Thank you for tolerating me being the time sheriff this morning. I'm always surprised at this event. First of all, when I started moderating this panel, I thought, really, economist at 8 a.m.? Is that going to work? But it does work, but I've never seen 3 economists agree. And Bill, you are normally my ace in the hole. You are normally the guy that comes in third and blows the other 2 up. And I don't know how to feel about that. I don't know how to feel about that. I do know that it's always nice to come to this and hear from economists that the world as we know it is not actually ending, and the republic as we know it is not actually crumbling. That's all the time we have for today. Thanks for being here this morning. Thanks for those of you who are here and trickled in. And before we go, though, I would like to introduce our other breakfast sponsor from U.S. Bank, Christina Ketsoyan, who'll give you a few guidelines and housekeeping rules for the balance of the day. Thank you.
Good morning, and wow, what an amazing group this morning. Thank you very much, gentlemen. My name is Christina Ketsoyan. I'm the Vice President and District Manager for U.S. Bank, San Fernando Valley District. We're happy to be here today with VICA and sponsor this event. We have a good standing relationship with VICA and U.S. Bank. So with that said, I want to tell you that at U.S. Bank, we're actively engaged in developing, strengthening, and energizing our community. We are invested and investing in our communities. Individually and together, we live our brand, which is it's all of us serving you. Let me again thank you, our panelists today, David, Marc, and Bill, and of course our moderator, Don. Great job, thank you very much. And I'm here to tell you a couple of things that you need to know for today. Please remember to fill out the exit surveys. Okay, it's also on the table for you. Give it back to the staff member, or you may even leave it at the registration booth in the foyer. The feedback is very important to us. Our breakfast session will begin at 9:30. In the meantime, I encourage all of you to visit our exhibitors. Complete the bingo cards that you have received at the registration by visiting all the exhibits. And you will have a chance to win. Are you ready for this? You have 2 round-trip airline tickets anywhere that Southwest Airlines flies. I wish they'd go to Europe. I would take that. An Americana gift basket worth $3,000. We have 2 tickets to Amundsen Theater and 2 Fitbits. I know I'm very excited for these prizes. Also, your name will be placed going to the raffle drawing if you tag or hashtag this event on Facebook or Twitter. Extra chances for anyone who uses the hashtag BFC2013, Business Forecast Conference, or tags VICA in a post. The name is VICA SF Valley on both Twitter and Facebook. One more time, let's give a nice round of applause for our presenters today and our sponsors. Thank you and have a wonderful event.
Everyone, please take your seats. We're going to start. Please take your seats.
This August, take on the massive responsibility? Yeah, I am actually. You have a new thing? I just ran into X, so I mean, it's just name tag. Or you could say how to do it. No. Take your name tag off. Take your name tag off. Yeah. No. What do you think? You should use it every time.
Because, you know,
Name tag off.
Good afternoon, everyone. If you could please take your seats, we're going to go ahead and get started with today's program. Wow, I didn't even need Stuart to get everybody quiet. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Marla Clemow, and I'm the president for LA Metro of Wells Fargo. We are proud to be one of the sponsors today, along with my good friends at Woodbury University, Mr. Don Clair. So we're very happy to be the presenting sponsors, along with many other sponsors today that we're going to mention a little later in our program. But I'm super excited. How many of you were here this morning? Okay. So how about those economists? Amazing. Yeah, let's hear it for them. And we had some amazing panelists, and thank you for their time as well to making this program successful. So if I could have all the panelists that spoke this morning, please stand and be recognized. I hear it was fantastic information. I know I took a lot away from this morning. It's all about learning and helping the economy grow, and that's what small businesses like all of you do. So first of all, thank you to all of you for being here and supporting the 25th Annual Business Forecast Conference. VICA does a fantastic job. Thank you for putting this together. They are truly a small business advocate for all of us in so many ways, and I'm honored to be a board member. And at Wells Fargo, we also are committed to small business. It takes a team of us to do so. There's no I in team. And I brought a little friend. Hopefully you guys will all enjoy your pony. This is Mac. Every pony at Wells Fargo has a history, just like our company. We've been around since 1852. And we cannot pull our stagecoach with one horse. We need a team, as I mentioned earlier. And I'm really proud that we have a team of 100 business bankers to help you with any business need that you may need here in the San Fernando Valley. If they could all wave, we have about 15 of them here today. Thank you so much for supporting Wells Fargo and being here to represent. So some of you are here this morning, so I don't want to bore you with my story about being from Wisdom, Montana, a town of 100 people, riding horses. I'm really a cowgirl dressed in banker clothes. So I thought, what could I do differently for this afternoon? Well, I had the opportunity to see one of world-renowned icons in investing and giving advice in investing, and a small business owner that you might know. And I had the honor of getting to see him speak a couple weeks ago, and that was Warren Buffett. And at first they didn't tell us who was coming out because he had a lot of security. And I was like, oh my gosh, you know, one of my icons around being successful. So I thought I would share a little bit about what he talked to us about. And if you didn't know, he's 83 years old, as sharp as a tack, and he's very down to earth. And he said a couple things that I wanted to share with you. And his quote is, "I don't look to jump over 7-foot bars. I look around for 1-foot bars that I can step over." The other quote that I love he shared, "Risks come from not knowing what you're doing." So he basically was saying invest in what you're familiar with, not something that you're not familiar with. His examples that he used are, you know, big investor in Coca-Cola, Geico, auto insurance, things that people need and he's familiar with is what he invests in. Proud to say he also is a large investor of Wells Fargo. And then he said something kind of funny around his philanthropy. He is still in the same house that he purchased in 1955. And he says, "I buy expensive suits, but they just look cheap on me." So he's quite the character and someone that I was pleased to be able to see speak. Wells Fargo, just so you know, is the #1 small business lender in America. We're very proud of this. We want to continue that commitment to all of you, but we do more than lending. So we have all kinds of great technology. Anyone try mobile deposit, we can do that for you. And our technology is the state of the art. But really what I would leave you with is find someone at any bank that you bank at that you can build a relationship with that can help you reach your financial goals for your small business, and have that trusted advisor that you can say really helped your company succeed financially. I hope it's Wells Fargo, but I have a lot of friends at other banks as well, and they're here representing us too today. So with that being said, I'd like to also take this time to make sure we acknowledge all the hard work, and if they could all stand and we give a big round of applause, to our VICA Board of Directors and our Board of Governors, and let's recognize them for all their service and their commitment of their personal time to VICA. So if we could have all our Board of Directors and Board of Governors stand. I also want to welcome the elected officials that we have with us today. And if I missed anyone, please get your card up to me. I'll make sure we recognize you. We have our LA City Council member, Bob Blumenfield, Glendale Unified School District Board member, Greg Krikorian, Castaic Lake Water Agency Director, Jackie McMillan, Mayor of Calabasas, Fred Gaines, Assembly member, Adrian Nazarian. Thank you all for being here. I just also want to give you a reminder. I don't know if any of you have seen the orange card, but this is the exit survey. So your opinion really counts to VICA, so please fill this out and share with us how you feel we can enhance or improve the conference for next year. We're very proud to hear what you have to say and want to make sure we take it into account. I know I'm already filling mine out, Stuart, and I have a lot of excellence there. I'm having a great time today. Okay, so let's move on to the next part of our program, which is really exciting. We're going to take a short break and allow you to eat your lunch, but after we allow you to eat your lunch, we have our very special keynote speaker today, and that's Senator Chris Dodd, Chairman and CEO of Motion Picture Association of America, who, yes, exactly. So I know we're all looking forward to hearing more from the Senator. Thank you so much for being here. Please enjoy your lunch and connect with your friends, and we'll come back in a few minutes to resume our program. Thank you again, everyone, for being here to celebrate our 25th annual VICA Business Forecast Conference. We're okay? Do you have a pony? Did you get a pony? Enjoying your lunch? A lot of connections happening out there. It's my honor and privilege. Now I'd like to introduce Don St. Clair, Vice President of Woodbury University, our other presenting sponsor for today's event and a great friend to mine. And he actually gives great advice. So I'm getting parenting advice. I have my 1-year-old, and every time we have a break, I'm getting more advice. So if you need parenting advice, go to Don as well. So please give Don a big VICA welcome. Thank you for being one of our presenting sponsors today. Thank you, Don.
Marla, I have been introduced dozens of times. I have never been introduced with a reference for my parenting advice, however. And I will note that in front of me at table 23, my wife rolled her eyes. Thank you. Woodbury University is once again proud to be a presenting sponsor of the 25th Annual Business Forecast Conference. This is, as we would say, in Woodbury University's wheelhouse. We concentrate everything we do at our 4 academic units, our College of Business, our School of Business, our School of Architecture, our School of Media, Culture, and Design, and our Institute for Transdisciplinary Studies on 4 pillars: entrepreneurship, design thinking, sustainability, and civic engagement. And as I walked around this morning, I saw all 4 of those pillars being engaged at this conference this morning. And we're most particularly proud to be here as a symbol of our commitment to not only the San Fernando Valley, but to the greater Los Angeles and Southern California region. And we're happy to be here again this year. Before we hear from our keynote speaker, I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce the people on the dais and thank our other sponsors. And those of you on the dais, I will not be making any personal endorsements for parenting skills or anything like that, so you can relax. I will start to my left, though, my very good friend, Joe Romalo, Director of Communications, Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, and a conference co-sponsor. I know Stuart wants us to stay on time, but I think it's okay to applaud these folks individually for their commitment. Or not. We just won't applaud you, Stuart, okay? Okay. Carlos Ingleworth, Director of Public and Government Affairs, Vons, one of our track sponsors. Lisa Pitney, Vice President of Government Relations, the Walt Disney Company, one of our lunch sponsors. Our keynote speaker today is Senator Chris Dodd, Chairman and CEO, Motion Picture Association of America. You've met Marla. Dave Adelman, VICA Chairman and Partner at Greenberg and Bass. To my right, Kobe King, President and CEO, High Point Strategies. Dr. Diane Harrison, President, California State University, Northridge, one of our breakfast sponsors. Mike Carter, Executive Director, Kaiser Permanente, Woodland Hills, one of our track sponsors. Patty McJennett, from the Los Angeles Convention and Tourism Board, a conference co-sponsor. And to our far right, Stuart Waldman, President of VICA. Go ahead and applaud. It's okay. I would like to take another moment to thank a few of our other sponsors, our additional co-sponsors, the Daily News of Los Angeles and the San Fernando Valley Business Journal. Our other track sponsors, Clear Channel Outdoor, Southwest Airlines, and Walmart. Our other lunch sponsor, Caruso Affiliated. And our breakfast sponsor, U.S. Bank. We would also like to thank the rest of our sponsors, advertisers, and exhibitors that help make this event a success. The list of them can be viewed in the event journal, on the PowerPoint presentation that has been running while you're having lunch, on the banners you see here, and on other signs around the hotel. VICA appreciates a great deal the support of our members, and it's great to see so many companies who find this event important. I know I do. Now let me bring Lisa Pitney, Vice President of Government Relations from the Walt Disney Company, up for the honor of introducing our keynote speaker, Chris Dodd.
Thank you, Don. It's Disney's great pleasure to be a sponsor of this luncheon for this wonderful event. VICA's had some really incredible speakers at this conference, and I'm honored to have the opportunity to introduce today's keynote speaker. Former U.S. Senator Chris Dodd is the chairman and CEO of the Motion Picture Association of America, which serves as the voice and advocate of the U.S. motion picture, home video, and television industries all around the world. The major motion picture studios consistently produce and distribute the most sought-after and enjoyable entertainment on Earth, and protecting this great American export during a challenging economy and an ever-changing technological landscape is Senator Dodd's highest priority. Senator Dodd served in Congress representing the state of Connecticut for 36 years, where he was a key participant in nearly every major national policy debate over the past 3 decades. He authored or co-authored major legislation in the areas of education, health, financial services, foreign policy, election reform, and I'm sure I'm forgetting a few. Please join me in welcoming Senator Christopher Dodd.
Thank you very, very much. And Lisa, thank you for the brevity of that introduction, too. I appreciate that very, very much. And I'm honored that you asked me to come out to be a part of this event today at VICA, and congratulate you all who are participating in the tremendous work that you do. And so thanks for the invitation. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention President Waldman and Chairman Adelman as well for their leadership of this organization. I was thinking, Lisa, I do appreciate the brevity of the introduction. As you can imagine, over 36 years, I've been introduced a lot of different ways and a lot of different events over the years. And I sort of collected introductions that I thought were some of the best I ever heard. My favorite was, not of me, but actually of a well-known historical personage. This was William Howard Taft, the only one of our fellow citizens who ever, of course, achieved the status of being President of the United States and Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court. He had retired and was being honored at a black-tie dinner at the Waldorf Astoria back in the early part of the 20th century. And the master of ceremonies was the United States Senator from New York in that time, a fellow by the name of Chauncey Depew, actually was his name. Chauncey, to give you an idea how things have changed, was not only the senator from New York, but he was also simultaneously the president of the New York Central Railroad. No conflict of interest there, I'm sure, at all, in what he was doing. But Chauncey thought of himself as a sort of a clever gadfly. Taft, you may recall, was not only a giant in what he had achieved, but was a giant physically. Stood about 6'8", weighed over 400 pounds. Anyway, Chauncey went on at some length at this very distinguished gathering and concluded, Lisa, his introduction of Taft by saying, "It now gives me a great deal of pleasure to introduce you to a man who is both pregnant with integrity and pregnant with courage." Well, the crowd roared its approval. Taft slowly made his way up to the podium, waited for the crowd to be reseated, the noise to subside. He turned to the audience, he said, "If it is a girl, I shall call her integrity." He said, "And if it is a boy, I shall call him courage. But if, as I suspect, it's nothing more than gas, I shall call it Chauncey Depew." I'm just saying. So when you hear these wonderful introductions, I can't help but resist mentioning that. And I must say, it feels good to be out of Washington. I get often asked in these days, do you miss being in Congress? I say, sometimes I do, but not this Congress, I can tell you, not today. So it's nice to receive an invitation to be here. I'm not going to talk about the Congress. We'll leave that for another conversation. I want to also recognize, if I can, a few people. First, I want to mention Rick Finkelstein is a wonderful man, worked at Universal, chief operating officer, who passed away a few days ago. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Rick. Had a wonderful career, a courageous fighter. I was with him only a couple of weeks ago here, in fact, at a meeting for 2 days, and it was very sad to hear that he is gone, and did a wonderful job for Universal and the film and television industry for many, many years. So I'd be remiss to the folks from Universal. And I'm pleased that some of my studios are here today. I know that we have tables from Universal and Disney, and again, Lisa, thank you, and folks from Fox, as well as Paramount, the Directors Guild of America, the Teamsters. We have a good representation of people from the industry have come together. And I'd be further remiss if I didn't mention Melissa Patak and Sarah Walsh, along with Debbie Boyce, people who work and do work at the Motion Picture Association, who are here as well and had a lot to do with getting me out here today and becoming a part of the event. So I thank them as well. I've been on the job now with the Motion Picture Association for 2.5 years. But the very first speaking engagement I had was to the LA Chamber of Commerce. In fact, Gary Tobin, I think, is here. He came up and introduced himself. There you are, right in front. So I was on the job about a week, I think, when you were in Washington at the Willard Hotel with a large delegation from Los Angeles, and had me down to talk. And it was a courageous thing to invite someone who knew nothing about this business at that point. It was learning along the way. But I appreciate very much the warmth with which you received me that day. Anyway, this VICA, of course, this organization has been a powerful advocate. I'm preaching to the choir, obviously, about this, but a powerful advocate for businesses and workers alike in both the San Fernando Valley as well as the greater Los Angeles area now for some 5 decades. Really quite an achievement. And I'd be remiss at the outset of these brief remarks if I didn't thank you on behalf of the Motion Picture Association of America, our member studios, some of whom are here today, along with all of those very hardworking men and women who go to work every day in this city in the film and television industry. I was very excited to receive the invitation to come to Los Angeles last evening for a number of reasons, not the least of which was to say thank you to this organization for the tremendous support that you've given this business for so many years. For more than a century now, beginning with D.W. Griffith's 1910 production of In Old California, that film shot here in this state, this city and the state of California have stood without parallel as the global capital of the film industry. From Cecil B. DeMille to Sam Goldwyn, the Warner Brothers, Ron Howard, Catherine Bigelow, Spike Lee, J.J. Abrams, Steven Spielberg, of course, along with so many other great artists and creators that have been drawn to the City of Angels with the dreams of becoming a part of this remarkable, iconic industry. When the early film pioneers first arrived 100 years ago in Los Angeles, it was a small community, relatively small, some 300,000 people. Today, as all of you know and are aware, 4 million people call city of Los Angeles their home, thanks in no small part, I might add, to the attraction of people coming out to work in the film and television industry over these 10 decades. So allow me to share with you some quick facts, if I may, of which I'm sure you and VICA are all aware. This film industry is directly responsible in this state for more than 200,000 jobs, almost 90% of which are production, blue-collar jobs, generating $17 billion in wages. If you add the jobs not directly generated by the film and television industry, but which exist primarily because of the industry's support, the motion picture and television industry in California is responsible for more than 540,000 jobs and $41.6 billion in wages. It's quite a record, quite a story. No matter where you turn in this city, you come across pieces of Hollywood history, whether it's the iconic Hollywood sign, Griffith Observatory, or the Leo Carrillo State Park, which has been doubling for the beaches of Iwo Jima, the Caribbean, and countless other exotic locales over 6 decades. Last year alone, more than 40 million tourists traveled to the Los Angeles area, and I will guarantee you that one of the main reasons they came to Southern California was to see the sights from their favorite films and TV shows, tour a studio, or simply hope to encounter their favorite celebrities walking along Sunset Boulevard. So these statistics, I cite these statistics, not merely because they stand today as an important part of this state's economy and history, but also because the days when almost all film and television production occurred here is declining. And I want to talk about that today briefly. Today, American movies and TV shows are being made in all 50 states, as well as Canada and a number of locations around the globe. And unless a more competitive plan to keep these films and TV shows here, and it begins soon, then the number of productions and production-related jobs leaving the state will continue to grow, in my view. Therefore, allow me to address a couple of serious challenges that I see to this industry and directly to the community, of course, that has benefited from the presence of this industry over the years. First, to put it very bluntly and on a broad scale, the jobs and work of filmmakers, the directors, the writers, cameramen and women, makeup artists, if you will, and the thousands of others who work on movies and TV shows are being threatened by theft and distribution around the world on pirate sites, generating huge profits for these illegal operators, not to mention making those who download the stolen properties subject to significant financial harm or identity theft as well. Instead of providing rightful compensation for the creators and makers of this content, a growing percentage of the profits are going to these overseas pirate sites. Last Sunday night, by the way, in the last showing of Breaking Bad, that program was stolen 500,000 times in a 12-hour period. Just to give you one recent example of just one product here made by Sony Pictures. The continuing problem of content theft not only denies these innovators, owners of their just compensation, it also has a dramatic impact on future projects. Under the best of circumstances, the film and television creators have always taken big financial risks in developing their products, and attracting investors has never been easy. But the added threat of theft places further strain on the funds available for new productions, depressing the quantity of mid-level budget films that are so essential in generating such a vital part of this city's economy. To respond to this growing problem of film and television piracy, the movie and television community is committed to developing new and innovative ways for audiences to watch content online legally and at an affordable price point for consumers. In fact, more than 400 legitimate streaming services worldwide now offer movies and TV shows, including content produced specifically for online distribution. And 95 of those legal, affordable services exist right in the United States. By the way, information and links to these sites, I want to also tell you, can be found on our MPAA website, wheretowatch.org, and I hope many of you would try that website out as a place where you can actually find where to find these legal products. But even with these efforts, online piracy continues to grow. By some estimates, online piracy of all forms of intellectual property, not just film and television, represents nearly 25% of all internet traffic. The dangers of piracy go far beyond film and television. The aerospace industry, not an insignificant business in this valley, will tell you flatly how important this issue is to them, not to mention pharmaceuticals and many other businesses. Other IP-intensive industries may not feel it yet, some aren't talking about it. But if we allow our copyright laws to be diluted and the principles behind protecting intellectual property be eroded, how long will it be before we move from movies should be free to that new car design, or the blueprints for that new smartphone should also be available at no cost with no protections for their innovators or creators? So what do? While litigation and legislation can be important, I don't believe at all that we can just litigate or legislate our way out of this problem. I believe that all players in the internet and IP ecosystem, copyright owners such as we are, and the various intermediaries that facilitate online commerce and speech, the ISPs, the advertising networks, and payment processors share a common responsibility, in my view, all of us do, to solve this problem. And as the gatekeepers or portals to the internet, search engines must also bear a responsibility to play a constructive role in confronting this challenge. A study released just last month demonstrated the continuing role search engines play in introducing audiences to infringing film and television content. In fact, 74% of consumers surveyed cited using search engines to discover or navigate to infringing sites in their initial efforts to find legitimate products. The data showed that audiences who viewed pirated films or shows for the very first time online are often twice as likely to use a search engine getting there as repeat visitors. And the majority of them, 82%, use the largest of all the search engines, of course, another great company in the state, Google. These search engines have the ability, in my view, to stop directing audiences to sites with illegitimate content. And I am still hopeful that we can work with them in the coming days and weeks and months to find ways to make this happen. The second issue I want to address to you briefly this afternoon has to do with keeping the industry here, the production tax credit issues. As members of VICA, you're well aware that film and television production here in Los Angeles faces another challenge: the growing number of productions moving out of this state, in fact, out of our country as well. Other communities are feverishly developing their own film and television production infrastructure, both human and physical, I would add. They have come to realize what California has always known: film and television productions are important job creators and economic generators. Let me share another statistic if I can. An average film shoot spends $50,000 a day on everything from cast and crew salaries to catering, dry cleaning, lumber, hotel rooms, autos, and so much more. As other jurisdictions in the United States and elsewhere are luring production companies away from Los Angeles with very attractive tax incentives. It does not take long for these states and countries to attract and train talented local people to do the work that historically could only be found here, and few other places as well, and few other places around the globe. Case in point, I was at a film site in the state of Georgia where Robert De Niro and John Travolta were making a film. There were 100 people on that set on that cold morning last winter. All but one of those individuals were from Georgia, all trained to do the jobs that historically had been done here. The company didn't pack up and have to bring people from California to do that job. Another example, while filming in New York, The Amazing Spider-Man 2 is expected to hire 3,500 crew members, 11,000 extras during production. And the hit TV series Breaking Bad, which has ended its first year last Sunday, as I mentioned a moment ago, spent an estimated $1 million per episode over those 5 years in Albuquerque, New Mexico, on goods, services, and wages. Today, more than 40 states, the United Kingdom, Australia, New Zealand, the majority of EU nations, and Canada all offer attractive financial incentives to snare production and post-production jobs. The good news, of course, must be that in 2009, the members of the California legislature recognized how competitive it is becoming and approved its own tax credit program to keep production here in the state. And last year, that program, which has shown tremendous success in stemming the tide of runaway productions, was extended. So thanks, no thanks in smallest part, or thanks in great part, to VICA's support and the aggressive advocacy of local representatives, the state legislature, and Governor Brown, I might add as well. 125 film and television productions have received credits, resulting in nearly $5 billion in direct spending, benefiting the state's economy and roughly 20,000 jobs that have been supported because of that program. Let me give you an example exactly of what I'm talking about and how it impacts a local business. History for Hire is a very small company located in North Hollywood, specializing in supplying historical props for film and television shows. Half of the company's 17 employees today are working on providing historically accurate guitars, microphones, and other music props for Clint Eastwood's next movie, Jersey Boys. Because the film qualified for the California Film and Tax Credit Program, production stayed in the state, keeping that small company growing and those 17 employees at History for Hire working. And while these credits have done well, keeping small and mid-sized productions in California, demand for these credits continues to far exceed their supply. Every year, the available funds under this program has been entirely allocated on the very first day that they were offered. And as it stands now, only productions with budgets under $75 million can qualify. This means large budget blockbusters that could employ thousands and invest millions of dollars locally are left out. Guess where they go? Do you recall just a moment ago I told you about the amazing Spider-Man 2 in New York? It should be no surprise then to understand why 11 of last year's 12 largest blockbusters were filmed in states like Louisiana and New Mexico instead of California. And this trend is going to continue to grow. Next spring, the latest Star Wars films will begin production in London. And no sooner was a sequel in the summer's hit, Man of Steel, that it was announced that it would be confirmed that Michigan would be the site for filming that film. Now, my job at the Motion Picture Association is to advocate on behalf of my studios, not the locations of their productions. But I know the studios that I represent, quite candidly, would prefer, everything else being equal, to make their films and television shows here in the state of California, for many reasons. Therefore, for starters, the size and number of available tax credits needs to be increased, in my view, and bigger productions must be allowed to qualify for them if we're going to keep the jobs here in this state. We also need to give long-term productions, particularly television series, the ability to plan further ahead than their current season if they're going to stay and do the jobs, create the jobs here. I realize this is not easy, and I know that regardless of how much people love our products or the importance of California, we are one of many interests that are competing for support during some very rough economic times here in this state. Some have argued, of course, that these credits are nothing more than a handout to the rich, red carpet walking, tuxedo and gown wearing celebrities at award ceremonies. But people need to remember these famous faces you see comprise less than 1% of the industry workforce, and they are financially compensated regardless of where the production takes place. Remember, it is the thousands of below-the-line workers, those makeup artists, those set creators, those grips, those truck drivers, those 17 employees at History for Hire I spoke of, and those names that people don't wait to notice when the credits of a film and then of a film are rolling. These are the people who are affected. They don't have the ability to go elsewhere. The leaders of this industry love this state and this city. I know it. I talk to them almost daily. They love living here. They love working here. They love raising their families here. The film industry is not suddenly folding its tent or moving elsewhere. That's not my point here at this luncheon today. The people of California would never allow that, in my view. They're proud the industry calls the state their home. And yet we all must recognize that more needs to be done to keep this industry from slowly slipping away. Just a few months ago, the people of Los Angeles inaugurated a strong ally of this industry, and Mayor Eric Garcetti. A big part of the mayor's campaign was on his promise to fight runaway productions in this city, in those jobs in California. and beginning with the inaugural address in which he announced that he would be appointing a film czar to work directly with the industry, Mayor Garcetti has made this issue a priority of his administration. And just last week, as many of you may have seen, he fulfilled that inaugural promise by announcing the appointment of a good friend of mine and the former head of the Academy of Motion Pictures Arts and Sciences, Tom Chirac, to be the new film czar for this area. That is great news, not only for this business, but it's great news for the state of California and the city of Los Angeles. So with allies like Mayor Garcetti and Tom Chirac and VICA, who understand the importance of this industry, I'm optimistic as I stand before you today that Los Angeles and California will remain that premier location for making films and television shows in this state and the city. The industry is betting on California's future as well. Disney, Paramount, and NBC Universal have all announced large, long-term expansion plans for their facilities because they plan on being here for the long haul as well. We may have some tough work ahead of us, and it's important to acknowledge it, understand it, not shy away from it, and address it. But I want you to know that I deeply appreciate the opportunity to share these thoughts with you as now the head of the Motion Picture Association, and my affection for this state, that you've given a warm welcome to a Connecticut Yankee to come to California and tell you how important this industry is and how important this state and this city is to this industry. And I thank you all for listening. Thank you all very, very much. Thanks. Thanks. No, I hope that wasn't too long.
That was awesome.
Thanks.
Oh, that was dangerous. Well, thank you, Senator Dodd. It's certainly great to hear from such a distinguished leader. We really appreciate you being here today. We would like to thank you with a token of our appreciation. We have a little gift for you.
I can accept gifts now.
You can. We truly appreciate you sharing your insights at today's conference. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Very much.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Julie Jauregui. I'm from Caruso Affiliated and the general manager of the Americana brand in Glendale. Before we move into the fun things, which is the prizes, the raffle prizes, let's recognize our presenting sponsors, Wells Fargo and Woodbury University, and all the other generous sponsors today. Thank you. Caruso Affiliated is proud to work alongside all of you to make the Valley the best place to live and to work. And like many of you, we are never content and we are always innovating. The Americana brand was recently named one of the top 15 shopping centers in the world. If you haven't been there in a while, now is the time to visit. We just opened a brand new 135,000 square foot Nordstrom store, and I assure you, ladies and gentlemen, it will definitely exceed your expectations. We also are adding 2 new restaurants to our property. Din Tai Fung, which was voted the best Chinese food by the New York Times in the nation. And that will open next month, so please do visit. And coming this spring is Bourbon Steak by Michael Mina, which is sure to be a favorite to everyone. Michael Mina is one of the most highly rated celebrity chefs. At Caruso Affiliated, we are proud to do our part in strengthening the economy and quality of life in San Fernando and San Gabriel Valleys. Now I would ask the VICA chair, David Adelman, to join me for the first drawing item of a gift basket, and it just happens to be the first one is from the Americana brand.
Thanks, Julie. In the immortal words of Cuba Gooding Jr., show me the money.
All
right?
Yes, absolutely.
So thanks so much for offering this great gift basket from Americana brand. We also have some other great gifts today. We have 2 round-trip airline tickets anywhere Southwestern Airline flies. We have 2 tickets to the Amundsen Theater to see Matthew Bourne's Sleeping Beauty, donated by the City Center Group. And we have 2 Fitbit activity trackers donated by Pacific Federal Insurance Corporation. Now, a lot of people worked really hard to get their business cards in this jar. So if you went around and got all of your raffle cards punched, you're in this jar. If you gave your business card at registration, you're in this jar. Or if you tweeted or Facebooked with a VICA hashtag, you're also in this jar. So you have to be present to win. That's the rule. So if and when you win, claim your prizes at the registration desk. Here you go.
Ready? Okay.
So the first prize is this gift basket from American at Brand, and it's a basket worth $3,000. And it includes free parking for a year at the Americana. Lots of restaurants.
Strategic.
Who's our winner?
Okay. It looks like Bruce Bloom.
Where's Bruce Bloom? Bruce Bloom, congratulations. You don't need to come up here. You can stay where you are, unless you want to be the next chair. Okay, now for the Fitbit #1 gift.
Looks like we have, let's see, Rika. Is it
Toyama.
Canes? Rika Canes? Toyama
Rika
Canes?
Toyama Games. Where are ya? Rika, are you here? Nope.
Okay, pick another. Oh, she's here.
Where is she?
She's at the booth. Oh, she's at the booth.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, now for the next Fitbit.
Here we go. Let's see. Judith Flint. Let's see. Baltawort?
Baumwart.
Baumwart.
Where is she?
I think she's over here. Okay,
All right.
congratulations.
All right, now for our tickets to the Amundsen.
All this small font here. Jeffrey Rose. Ross. So sorry, Jeffrey Ross. Is Jeffrey here? Oh, right
Nope.
here? No.
All right, next.
Okay, next.
Do you have reading glasses?
I do, but they're not strong enough, clearly. Okay,
Oh,
we've
we know
got
him.
Lane Lawson.
Hey, Lane.
Congratulations.
Okay, the first Southwest Airlines ticket goes to
Ken Phillips.
Jackie Matsumoto.
Jackie.